Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of On Board. I'm Steve Bonnetz. Board President Tom DeBello and Board Vice President Joe Cerisi joins me to discuss topics that will directly affect the community. If you have questions that you would like answered on this show, email onboard@rctv@spring-forward.net. Let's bring Tom and Joe in. Welcome, gentlemen.
Good morning. Good to see you, Steve.
How are you?
It's a great day.
You ready for summer?
We are ready. It's right upon us.
I see that.
Which means budget time. Budget just got passed.
Yep.
And at 0.7. Started at 4, went to 2.5, went to 1.5, and now we're at 0.7. As board members, you guys must be very excited for that.
As board members, we are, but Tom works a lot, obviously being the head of finance, the finance committee, and worked really hard this year to get us to where we are, which is the lowest increase we've ever seen. Now, any increase we don't want to see, but I say we are happy to see the lowest ever. I mean, he could speak to how many hours and the time he put in to get us there, and then with his direction with Jim Fink, we were able to get to this point.
I mean, it is dropping. It's very difficult to drop a budget. I mean, we went from 1.5 to 0.7. Why does it keep dropping?
Well, if you remember back in January during the preliminary budget, it was like 4 point something, and we have to put these numbers out based on what the state requires through the Act 1, and so we produce numbers, and we have basically from January to the end of June to finalize a budget.
Now, did that have to get moved up because of the presidential race?
The only thing that moves up is just the preliminary budget.
Okay.
That has to be out because of the primary is in April instead of May during a presidential election. So if we're going to go to referendum, it has to be part of the primary budget. And that's why, the primary election, and that's why you move it up. But the finalized budget is June 30th. That hasn't changed. But so we had the preliminary budget. We passed, back in January, and so we start working away, and in that same time we reinvent or whatever you want to call it, the whole business operations, and we brought in Jim Fink as the CFO and all that. So there's been a lot of analysis that was going on while we're looking at the budget during that 6-month process. And so each couple months when we meet at finance, we'd get an update, and we were able to make reductions in the budget. We were looking at certain growth and doing some financial analysis and looking at projections and all that, and we were able to keep bringing it down. And as we get into May, you're coming close to the end of last year's budget cycle, so you start to really get your arm around some actuals as well. So that helps in identifying, looking at projections versus actuals, and it gives you a good indicator of what next year is going to look like. And then when you go into end of May, you got to have that 30-day period or 20-day period, whatever it is, to advertise the budget. So we have to have something to put to the public so the public could come in and view the budget. But it's still not finalized, and we keep chipping away at it. And through June, we had some things that we're looking into and doing analysis on the staff as far as enrollment coming in and shifting employees around, especially at the elementary school, looking at, how many new hires do we need versus be able to accommodate the student population with the existing staff. So there's all this is going on, plus one of the other drops or reductions that we made basically within the last week was the school district a few years ago, we put self-funded insurance in place, and we've saved the Springport community millions, probably over $10 million in that period of time. But for us to look at, because you have to have a reserve as you're self-funded, so you have to build up your reserve, and we've been doing that over the last several years. And then when you look at the market adjustments in healthcare, that plays into it. And then we build into the budget each year some surplus to keep the reserve at a certain level. And we felt, I was talking with Jim, and we felt that looking at the actuals and looking at projections moving forward, we felt that we could actually reduce that surplus that we built into the budget each year to fund the self-funded insurance by about $500,000. So that got us down from the 1.5 that from last week.
From the work session,
from the work session,
1.5
right.
to.
So we went from like 4, like you said, and in May we were at 1.9, and then we got down to 1.5 at the work session, and then we went to finalize this recent board meeting. We were able to get down to 0.7 by redoing that $500,000 reduction, and also reevaluating some new positions where we felt that we, because of the new enrollment coming in and the current student population, we're able to keep, we basically have less new additions and resources.
Well, we took some of the money from the refinancing of the bond
Right.
at Western Center and spread it out over 6 years. Six
years.
years. The bond that we had for construction, now portion of it, there was a reimbursement, and we spread it out to keep our debt
Actually,
service.
7 years.
Was it 7?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, well, that's right, he did say 7.
Right.
To keep our debt service numbers down. That was a little bit helpful. That got us the extra, what, 0.75 or
Well, for every
57,000?
basically for every 1% increase in taxes, it brings an additional $1 million in revenue to the district. So $100,000 equals 0.1, right? So every $100,000 reduction, you're able to go down 0.1. So that's how we went from like a little under 1%, then we kept going down and making these changes. And the reason when we refinance bonds, we don't just take that whole lump sum and put it into the budget, because that's like one time, and then you have to make it up next year. So we lay out a strategy. And one of the things that, since Joe and I have been on the board, what we came on, and I've said this before, when we came into the district, the district was $285 million in debt. And we've laid out a plan, and we did refinancing bonds and all that, and we've paid down over $150 million of that debt in the six years. And so the good news out of all that is, and I doubt Joe and I will be on the board in 8 years from now. I mean, I feel that, other people need to come and get involved at some point. But we laid out a plan so that in 7 years, the district debt is actually going to be paid down to roughly, I want to say about $50 million. So, and this is all, from bonds, so you can't just take money and pay it off, because you have the certain regulations you have to follow when you do bonds. But after that, when we get to that point, our annual debt service it's basically going to drop.
Right.
So we've been planning and laying out this strategy so that when we get to that drop, if we are on the board, we'll know what to do. But there could be a strong possibility that there could actually be that year a possible even reduction in millage. So
that will affect the taxpayers drastically and directly
Yes.
in a positive way.
Positive way,
Very
Correct.
positive way.
Very positive way.
So, and the last thing I want to just talk about is that this budget, when I keep talking about this financial analysis and planning, this budget has a 0.6% built into it. So of that 0.7, 0.6 of it is planned, because each year, we've talked about this in the past, each year the PSERS, the retirement system, the state retirement system, mandates us to continually add more and more money, taxpayer money, into the PSERS system. So in about 6 years, I believe it is, there's going to be it's continually going up, and it's going to peak. And then when it peaks, it's going to plateau, as we know it today. What the legislator does 2 years, 3 years from now, God only knows. But we're planning based on what we know. And it's going to peak at where we're going to have to basically add 34% of our annual on top of our annual payment. So whatever that annual payment is, we have to add 34% of that back on top. And it's a big nut. And so that instead of, we know that's coming, so instead of saying, well, we're going to sit back 6 years, and when we hit that, then we're going to have to go to the community and say, that could have a 6, 7, 8% tax increase on the community to cover that. So working with Jim, and we are thrilled that, phenomenal.
Jim and Mary and their team.
Mary David Heiser, Jim Fink and their team, phenomenal job.
This is a tough year. This is a tough time of year, every year. Is
Right.
coming down and getting the final budget. Everybody's got to pull together, buildings, principals, administrators, and the business office for sure,
Right.
and then board members coming in and sitting there. Very tough year, very tough time of year.
Oh, extremely. But so just with that 0.6 is that if we do that every year, if we build that in, when we hit that peak, we'll be at a point where it won't have any impact on the district. So we're minimizing that impact.
Over the 6
over that
years.
6-year
Correct,
period
right.
instead of sitting back and doing nothing, and that's poor financial planning. And I know, like Joe says, nobody wants to raise taxes. I hate it. But we're also charged with, running a school district, and we've been extremely feasible and fiscally responsible. When I could sit here and tell you that, we've had over almost a 50% reduction in debt. I mean, it's doing self-funded insurance, saving the district, over $10 million probably.
We've seen the budget numbers each year, the tax increase go down. Well, the district's reputation and what happens in this district go up, and services continue to be in this district. We hear a lot about districts having money, and they're putting away money, and they have all this money. You hear that in the news all the time. And Tom's describing one reason, and what we're doing is to offset future increases. We've seen some districts where they did a 0% for 2 years, and all of a sudden they got to come back and it's 5 to 6% or 7%. You can't be that short-sighted. This is the way that we should have been planning for years.
Right. Well, we
5
have
to 10
been,
years out. Well, yes, we have, but years prior
right.
too. At a 5 to 10 year rolling budget, constantly seeing, okay, what's out front. So you're either your no increase or your increase is minimal. It's down here rather than up here. The other big factor that we hear about is the state. We have no clue what's happening in the state, and we've heard this over and over again.
Right.
Ed Dressler gave the PSBA report on Monday night, and I'm sure you heard it. He said it was 50 or 60 pages, and he highlighted some of the things. The big things that came out of that report, the biggest one for me, and I've said it as I've sat at this table every time, and Tom and I have talked about this, and Tom and I have, petitioned in Harrisburg and spoken in Harrisburg over it, is the payment to the charter schools. We're paying over $2 million of our budget to the charter schools.
Taxpayer money.
Right. Of taxpayer money, $2 million. Money that we hand over without any oversight from anybody on our board or any other board, that they could do what they want with. We're scrutinized for every penny that we have, but yet we can hand them $2 million and they do with it as they please. Now, what they do, I'm not saying that they party with it or anything like that, but there's no oversight like we have. There's not a business office or a board that sits over them like we have at the Western Center or we have at the IU or we have here. And that's taxpayer money, plus the busing that we have to have that goes out there. And Ed had a list of, 10 or 15 things that we talked about. The whole thing with Peasers, and like I said at the board meeting, the Peasers debacle had nothing to do with our teachers in the state. It was the state with the money. Yet we have to make up for the state's mistake because they're not making up for it, and this is one of the things we have to do to make up for it. So it's a challenge. And the biggest challenge of all, and you've heard us say this, and we've both said this, is the calendar. The state still doesn't have a budget. We had a vote on our budget. Right. We have no idea what's coming from them. We're making the assumption that we're getting exactly what we got last year, but it could be less, it could be more. We have no idea because we have to have a budget in place. So that every year there's a challenge, and to see, and we've been lucky, and well, not lucky, we have a great business office that's on top of it. And I give Tom kudos to this all the time because he works with them as a finance, the chair of finance, and really gets down into it to get us to where we are. So we really had, this year was probably, it is the best that we've ever been able to do.
It's the best. It's the lowest tax increase probably in the history of Springford, and definitely over the last 15 to 20 years. I mean, before we came onto the board, the average tax increase was about 5.5%. Our average tax increase
now with
is about one. It's going to be about 1.5%. And again, like Joe said, we've laid out this whole strategy. This has been in the works year after year. Keep chipping away at it, where we've gotten each year our tax increase has been less and less. I mean, you can't come in. There's district. I mean, we build in $2 million a year into the budget for just capital improvements, building improvements. So our buildings, we keep them at a level of pride. But more importantly, we keep them at the level so that all of a sudden in 5 or 10 years, we don't all have to go out and spend $10 million because our buildings are falling. I mean, and districts, there are districts that do that. There are districts that spend no money on capital improvements. And then all of a sudden, the roofs are leaking, the heating system's broke. I mean, they have all, and then they sit there and start getting bills of $10, $15 million. And it's like, then they start looking at it, like, what are we gonna do? We laid out a plan, we work with Bruce Cooper, and we laid out a 20-year strategy. And that's rolling 20 years because a lot of stuff in school districts, chillers and all that, have end of life.
Right.
And you have to plan for that. So we've laid out this financial strategy where we're spending about, it works out to about $2 million a year. And people come into our buildings and they're proud when they walk into our buildings and they see the state that they're in. And it is pride, but it's also smart, minimizing long-term negative impacts.
Sure,
Well,
that's being fiscally responsible.
Well, it is,
That's
and-
ultimately what it comes down to being.
Right, and what really Tom just described was the feasibility study and what that came back with. I mean, I know this is a topic, but before we get to that, I want to say that as we're doing all this, we're also seeing our student body change from what they were and what Springford is. We just saw the list of colleges that our kids are going off to. More importantly, we saw the list of colleges that our kids applied to and got into. It has to be one of the most diverse lists I think we have ever seen as a board.
Yeah.
Now, they may have chosen to go somewhere else for whatever reason, financial distance, but the list that we saw, I don't think we've ever seen so many different colleges that our kids are getting into.
Well, Katie McNeil and Tricia Falco came in and did a presentation
Right.
at the work session, and you
Excellent
saw
job.
that exactly.
But we
saw
saw
the
even beyond
list.
that other list that they sent us that they didn't present that day. There are colleges all over the United States that our kids are getting into. They're doing an outstanding job, and it's a credit to where this district's going. Like we said, with the monies too, we're moving forward on each level, and I think it's a great point of pride for the 9 of us that sit there in the administration. But back to what Tom said about that, I know you're going to go into the feasibility study. The one thing I'll say about the feasibility study that came back was just what Tom addressed, that our buildings and our facilities are in top-notch shape. I think the one comment was, we're good for some of these for almost 40 years.
Right. If we continue to do what
What we're
we're
doing.
doing, these buildings will continue to be in the state that they are for 30, 40 years. So when an outside company comes in and that's the kind of report that they come back with, you're doing it right. And
Preventive maintenance.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
that's a
that's
lot of it.
ultimately what it is.
Yeah.
Preventive maintenance.
But I just want to, when we talk about pride in Springford, and because you brought up the Future Planning Center, and they're doing an incredible job there. And like Joe said, the students are applying, throughout the country, getting accepted throughout the country. We have, because of the success here at Springford and our moving forward in state and national rankings, Springford is becoming a leader in the state of Pennsylvania as a school district. That's been our goal.
Yes.
We've talked about raising the bar since we've gotten on this, and we're achieving that. And what that turns into is that a couple of things. The student success is phenomenal. We got multiple kids now going to Ivy League schools. We got a kid that was accepted into West Point. We had the graduating class this year got over $2 million in academic scholarships. I mean, the list just keeps going on. I mean, the almost 500 kids took the AP course and passed it. The test, and so when they pass it, those credits transfer into college credit. I mean, there's all this success. Real estate, it's the fastest selling real estate in Montgomery County. The realtors realtors can't keep an inventory of houses in the Springford School District because everybody. And the good thing is that all this success, and we've been able to continually chip away and lowering those taxes. Because it is a success. It's success everywhere. National rankings, top 9% high schools in the country. I mean, it just goes one after the other. So people, we need people to take pride in what's going on here because, from where we were 6 years
where
ago.
we are now, it's night and day.
Right, and so people, and we're the 16th lowest millage in the county. We're the 3rd largest school district in the county. We're the 20th lowest spend per student, so we're being extremely fiscal responsible with the spend per student based on the budget.
But we're using it properly,
Smart.
strategically, right.
It's smart.
Some people say, well, you should spend more, but our students are advancing.
Right.
So we're using the monies properly. You've seen the changes in this district in the time you've been here. I mean, we've talked about even within the studio, this is something that districts would only love to have, and you've made, or through this department, there's programming talking about everything that's going on in this district. So at any time someone can say, well, I don't know what they're doing in Springford. Well, tune in to RCTV or go online. Almost everything that we do, Points of Pride, that program we just talked about with the Future Planning Center, that's a great
PC
program.
report.
That is a great program for parents who have kids in the high school who want to really see what's going on there, who maybe weren't aware of it. And all the other programs too, I don't mean that, but each area we've grown in, and we've done things as a district to make the public more aware of the services that are here in the district and what we're doing with the money and the taxpayer money.
And that's knowledge. That's letting people know what's happening.
Right.
And everybody knows what's happening, so they can be a part of it.
Right.
Which is very, very important. So basically, we're coming down to the end of the school year. It is the end of the school year. You guys got a couple months off, and then the budget starts.
Not even.
1 month.
1 month.
Yeah, we're not even off, and we're off,
Yeah.
but we're not.
But the budget comes back in October, November again.
The
So you
budget's
have-
always here. I mean,
Yeah, because like Joe said, the state, their deadline to have a budget's June 30th, like ours. It was, I mean, the reports are coming out, they're not gonna have a budget. The House Appropriations Committee put forth a draft budget, I'll call it. Governor Wolf came back and said, well, that's great that we have a draft, but there's a projected $2 billion deficit in the budget that's not being addressed. The state legislator, and I don't know why you brought this up, Steve. The state legislators are going around, again, I mean, I guess the election's coming up, right? State legislators are going around, no new taxes in Pennsylvania, everything's staying the same. But I talked about this at the board meeting, and I'm tired of hearing it because they're not properly funding schools in Pennsylvania. And that, when they say, oh, another $100 million or $200 million for education, I mean, yeah, at the 100,000 foot level, that sounds great. But when you got 500 school districts and you take $200 million and divide that throughout the 500 school districts,
even, the way
and it's
divided.
right, the funding. I mean, that's a whole
That's
show.
a whole
That's a whole
subject.
show in
Right,
itself.
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
So they're forcing school districts to keep going back to the local communities because the state isn't doing their job. And it frustrates me when I hear our state legislators and all that sit there and boast about no new taxes, no increases in taxes. And I'm great. But if they could say that, and we as school districts could say that because they're cutting back on the unfunded mandates,
Right.
that's success.
Right.
Then everybody could get behind that. But as they continue to push and push and push to the local level, and I gave one example with the Peasers, right? That's one example. Charter schools, I mean, it just goes-
Special ed.
Special. I mean, it
Special
just,
ed. It just
and, they,
keeps going.
and they're unfunded. I mean, we're in our budget, we're probably over $20 million in unfunded mandates that we have to make up and from our local tax base.
Oh, it's probably higher than that.
Right. So it's just so I don't want to hear from the state legislators that no new taxes at the state level.
Right.
When they could properly fund school districts where we don't have to increase taxes and they could say no new taxes, then we're all being successful.
Right. Okay, moving on to the feasibility study. Joe, you brought that up. Where are we with the feasibility study? I mean, it was presented, I believe it was last month
Yes.
at the board meeting.
Yeah, well, we still have to analyze a lot of the feasibility study. The feasibility study looks at where the district will be in 10 years, 20 years out too? No, just 10 years out. Where we do see growth at our elementary level. We also see a plateau for a while at our elementary level, but Springford is still growing. Tom says this all the time. There's still a lot of land. There's still a lot of people who want to live here. And with the successes of the district, people are moving out, starting their families in Springford. So we as a board in the next few months, over the next year, are going to have to start making some decisions on where we're heading. I mean, these are projections, so you have to keep looking at them all the time. I remember a feasibility study, I guess around 2005, or so somewhere in there, that said by this point we'd have been over 10,000 students. We're only at 8,000. If we would have built for 10,000, we would have had a couple empty buildings now. So one of the challenges, and it's a difficult challenge, is for us to determine where we think we'll be and how we can get through the next few years. Is it through a building onto a building? Is it adding a building? Is it redistricting? And then I know the R word, redistricting people.
Well, people, I tell you what, that scares everybody.
But when redistricting is done the right way, everyone seems to be okay. I've been here for 2 redistrictings. I'm not saying we're doing it, but I'm saying it's possible. The last one we did was extremely smooth. But you can't do it, say we're going to redistrict in September and do it in October. Redistricting, the whole process takes a year and a half to implement, to see how it all falls out. You have to look at your busing issues. You have to look at families. You have to look at who's coming up through. You have to, again, study the population. So this has been in property for a while, this whole idea of a feasibility study. It did come back, it always comes back with what they call deficiencies. things that are always going to happen. You know, you need to fix this or improve on that. But there was nothing that was glaring. And the big glaring thing was the comment of these buildings are in great shape for about 40 years because of everything Tom alluded to. So over the next year, I think this is gonna be a hot topic that will be discussed a lot more. The direction of the board. I mean, the board just got the report. It's over 300 pages. To really absorb it, it'll be back in policy, not policy, property, to have a conversation on. But it is showing there's going to be growth here.
Well, and you talked about the shows and letting the community know what's going on. This would be a show that we're going to talk about redistricting. Are we going to redistrict? How we got the process? If it comes down to that. You're
Right,
not
again,
saying that at all.
We're not saying we're redistricting.
Not saying
we're not
that,
saying
but
we're doing anything right now. We're just
Absolutely.
saying these are options that sit
I'm
on
going
the
to
table.
read sound off now.
Yeah,
We're
we're
redistricting.
Yeah.
not redistricting.
We're not.
We're
look,
not
redistricting.
I
redistricting.
said for 2 years we're not building a $12 million
Oh,
fitness
my
center.
God.
Now we never hear the end of it. But again, redistricting, like Joe said, the R word is school districts all around us do redistrict, and parents get upset because in other districts some schools perform better than other schools and all that. Here at Springford, we pride ourselves in the investment that we're making into all our elementaries, because it's going to be, if we're going to redistrict, of course at the elementary level, we pride ourselves in invest. We have hybrid learning in Spring City. It's leading the nation in
Royersford.
now it's in Royersford. So the elementary, and it's the models are carrying throughout the elementary schools. So they're all performing very well. So parents, they shouldn't be upset because the schools themselves are, they're an administration and the staff, they're doing an excellent job.
Everybody's on the same page.
Everybody.
Yes.
Everybody's on the same
And the
page.
investment we're in a curriculum that we're doing at the elementary level. I mean, it's throughout the district. So
It's about being comfortable.
Exactly.
It's
It
parents
is.
and students. I'm telling you what, students can adjust very well.
But it's about, the bigger thing, it's about communication. And we need to be very cognitive of how we communicate the message. And the message needs to be communicated from day one till the end of the process.
Right.
Because that's when people are uneasy. All of a sudden they hear, well, we're redistricting next year, or we're redistricting next week. No, from the day we begin the idea, for whatever it is, whether it's construction, redistricting, or nothing, they need to be kept in the loop all the way through. And that's how you get buy-in. And the last time it happened here, that's exactly how it was, and that's why it was a smooth process. Not everybody's going to be 100% happy. I mean, but you got to look at every option.
Got to look at the majority. Can't please the masses. And you know what? You do the best you can, and
Right.
communication is the key.
look, we
get it
are,
out there.
again, I said earlier, our responsibility is to provide the best educational experience for our student population, current and, future. And the whole area is growing. And Springford's no different than any other, it's growing. It went through a massive growth, then it kind of flattened, and now it's peaking up again. People want to move here. You can't change that. You can't stop that. The only way you could stop that is become a low-performing district, and that we don't want that because now businesses and everything leaves, and now you really don't have a tax base, right? So that's the worst thing that can happen. So the things that are happening, yes, success breeds success, and people want to be around it. But it also helps, and that's why as we grow, the taxes have been coming down because it's more money going into the system as well. It's a place to be. But as Joe mentioned, we talked about, there's options. There's basically 4 major options: do nothing,
Right. expand
some of the current buildings, build a building, or redraw lines, and that's the next couple of years is going to be,
This is going to.
Is there a year that this is the feasibility study? Is it going to happen, or is it kind of you're just going to watch it and it could be 2 years, it could be 3 years?
This is something that ebb and flow. We got to keep watching it. There's going to be a point within the next few years. I mean, we're seeing some houses come online. We're seeing apartments come up as we see what comes out of those developments, how many kids come out of those developments. Every time they build, they give a number assigned to a house. If people move into a home whose children are grown or don't have children or children go to private school, they say, like, I don't know what it is, like 2.3 or whatever the number they give say. No one came out of there. So we're not seeing a registration go up. And that's where the difference was where we are today compared to what they thought we would be in 2005. They didn't see that kind of population growth. They still built those communities, but the numbers weren't coming out of those communities. So we just need to watch it because we need to be, the worst thing you could do is build a building that ends up being empty. or build a building that's overcrowded on the first day.
Well, how about right before we got on the board, the plan was to build another high school.
Yeah, another high school out in Swamp.
That would have buried, if they would have built that other high school, that would have buried this district. Financially, would have buried it, because just the cost of a new high school, what is it, 150 million or something like that?
Oh, it was 250.
Right,
At the end of the day.
And then the ongoing annual
Your buses,
costs.
your upkeep,
Oh,
your
and
staff.
then it would have buried the district.
Yep.
So
This-
we
this-
did put a slow down on that and say, whoa, wait a
Yeah,
minute.
that didn't happen.
So we're going to watch that coming up.
Yes.
And then we'll talk about that in later shows.
Yep.
Now, you just brought up busing. Some of the things might be changing for busing coming up. We might be adding more bus stops, and the walkers might have shorter walks. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, just real quick, I mean, because this is, what I brought up a couple months ago at the board meeting, and you know, the board supported the idea that Dr. Gooden to work with the transportation. You know, there's state guidelines that, you know, the walking distance from a school, you know, elementary, I believe it's a mile, secondary, it's like a mile and a half.
Yep.
And, you know, that served its purpose over time, but, you know, things are changing, of course, right? And we have to revisit that. You know, and it really, the impact at the elementary level really is the two schools are going to be impacted by the decisions that we're making. Is going to be Spring City and Rochefort, because they're more still community schools. Like, they probably have the most walkers, those two schools, compared to the other schools, the other elementary schools, because the way where they were built and where the developments are,
Schools.
you know, 90% of the kids are being bused, or could be bused. I mean, a lot of parents love to drop their kids off at the school, but 90%. But Spring City and elementary still probably have the biggest population of, you know, because they're more of a community school. They're built in, like Rochefort's built inside Rochefort, Spring City's in Spring City. So, but we start looking at that and saying, you know, we're looking at reducing it potentially down to half mile. You know, in Spring City, you know, just for example, we probably could add 4 bus stops in Spring City and pick up 75% of the kids
Without adding a bus.
Well, no, we're not at,
The
because
bus passes
there's
by
a,
them anyway.
right. There's a bus that, because where the line is for Springfield Elementary is just on this side of the river in Rochefort along 2nd Street. So we have a bus that comes down and picks those kids up, brings them over the river, and then brings them to Spring City Elementary. That's the bus stop. It's the same bus.
Right.
So we'll just create a route that they'll come over the river, go up, pick up 2, make a swing up the top, come back down, pick up 2, you know, have 2 bus stops, and then swing right over and drop off at right out elementary. And you're talking adding, you know, that whole thing could be probably done in adding like 10, 15 minutes using the same bus. And
So not costing any more
not
money, really.
costing any more money,
No.
nope. And the same thing in Rochefort. We have kids that are walking about a mile out that as they're walking to school in the morning,
The bus is passing
passes
by.
the bus, and their friends are waving to them on the bus as they're going by. You know, so we could utilize the buses that we have, just putting a couple more stops in along these routes to pick up these kids.
But Tom alluded to, it's a changing time. And the time's changing where traffic in Royersford and Spring
Right,
City
yeah.
is grown exponentially. I mean, with the growth of Limerick and Upper Providence and Royersford and the Springford community, and in the outlying communities that aren't even in our district, where we're seeing homes going up all over O&J, the cars are coming down Main Street. The cars are coming across Bridge. And I think I heard, I could be wrong, but I think I heard somebody say, one traffic study said 17,000 cars a day go down Main Street, Royersford. To where 10 years ago, that number was probably 8,000 or 10,000.
5 maybe.
Right, 5. So we need to adjust with the changing time. And you know, you have an elementary kid walking on Main Street in Royersford with that many cars. Who knows? You know.
Well, there are crossing guards,
right,
but
there
still,
are, but
I
still,
mean,
it's a far walk. And if it's not going to cost us anything more to pick that kid up on the way in, add those few bus stops for safety issues, I think we should.
So you're looking at going from a mile to a half a mile.
Possibly.
Somewhere
There's
around
no
there.
number
Somewhere.
out
There's
yet.
no,
And
I'm
it's not
just,
happening coming up. This
well, no,
might
our goal is to do it
do
to
it
start
this year.
This
the
year.
school year.
Okay,
Dr.
okay.
Gooden,
They'll be looking at that.
right.
soon.
Well, they're looking at it. I mean, they start planning all the bus routes like now. When school ends, they start looking at because there's all the new registration, all this
Right.
goes into it. So they start looking at the bus routes so that by August, for the start of school year, whatever we're going to do, that's all planned in. And the same thing at secondary, the furthest our kids going from Spring City, there's 2 bus stops now in Spring City to pick up our secondary education and our high school kids. And it's like, well, but we have kids walking, possibly, half a mile to 3/4 of a mile to get to those bus stops. So we're saying, and again, the same situation where these kids are walking and a bus is driving by them. Right?
And the buses aren't full.
No.
Because that's why we're able to do this.
Right,
because
exactly.
the buses aren't full, you can fit more kids.
Well, I don't want to make it look like to the public we're running empty buses either.
Well, no,
I mean,
no.
Right.
The buses aren't at capacity, let's say it that way. There's still room to grow on the bus. But these buses, all of our buses in our district are pretty full. If you ever watch the bus go by, those kids are in that bus. I mean, we're at where we should be. Because busing's a big issue, and it's a budget item that
A big budget item.
Yes,
Right.
it is. But it's a necessity too, and it's a necessity in the way our districts are spread out. If all our elementary schools were community schools, and the community was a much tighter knit community as far as where they were, you wouldn't need busing. But we're spread out. I think our district is 44 or 46 square miles round. And then we bus too, because of the mandates, to the charters, to the private schools, to the parochial schools. I mean, our buses are going everywhere, and that's another big item in our budget.
Of the transportation budget, that's a huge expense.
Okay. Well, anything else you want to discuss? No. I think we're good.
I like the purple combination.
Yeah.
The
well,
tie.
it's that dark
shirt.
tan. You've been
but Easter was what, a few months ago, so you missed
he's
it.
a little bit behind. Listen, this water was some of the best we had.
I'm okay.
I really enjoyed it. I mean.
So we're gonna have Arboretum pictures?
Yeah.
When are we doing that?
I don't know.
Well, I thought we were
going to film in the Arboretum.
I guess we could do that.
We could do like a fall show in the Arboretum.
That's right.
Well, we missed the spring show because everything was
passed.
blooming, all the
Right, we wouldn't wanna
flowers.
see
We wouldn't want to see that.
No,
we
everything's dying off.
We'll do that in the wintertime.
Yeah,
when
and
there's
we need to
snow
have
in there.
Gail Wellington on that show.
That's absolutely.
Gail needs to be interviewed for all and that she has done. She's still doing. I don't know if you saw the last pictures of the wildflower garden or area that's starting to bloom, and the new arch. What's that called? All of a sudden, I lost the word. The arbor.
Arbor, yeah.
Yeah, the new arbor that they're putting in. And I was over there a couple weeks ago, and it does look great. I mean, the amount that our kids have done, and Gail is there all the time.
All the time.
Gail has given so much of herself to that project and asked for nothing in return. And that's what's great about this district. Beyond just the Arboretum, we have so many people who step up to the plate, who volunteer.
Rita's,
like we saw that with
Autism.
Bev, with the McNutts the other night. The McNutts are all over our district helping out. We have a lot of great people, and that's what makes the district great, is the people who step up. SNAP happened, since we've last been here. All the parent volunteers who come out for that. We had I know this isn't on your agenda, but the last President's Council meeting we had, seeing the volunteers and the parents talking about the time and the energy that they're putting into. And you see Bern Pett at every meeting. Make sure he thanks, even if we all have, he goes back and thanks all the home and school organizations, and see that list that comes out.
It's important. Those organizations are what makes a school district go around, and it helps, helps funding certain things, but it brings the community closer.
Those organizations are, I always say, they're the backbone of the district. Without what they're providing, I don't know what we would be doing, how we'd be able to do it today. So they do phenomenal.
They do a great job.
Absolutely. Well, I hope you guys both have a great summer.
You too.
Well, we should try to get back here before school starts.
He's very busy.
Well, I know he's
very, very busy.
But there's some new exciting stuff that's going to be going on next year, and we should get back and talk about the upcoming school year.
But I think we need a month off. You guys have a month off.
You'll miss us in that month.
You know what? I will.
Well, yeah,
I'm so busy though.
Your ratings will go down if we're not here.
So,
well, he's got soup on.
Yeah, your ratings will go down.
Let's see. I bet they will go down.
Yeah.
You guys have a great summer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For a complete schedule of all the shows, log on to springford.net and click the RCTV tab. And if you missed a show that's not airing anymore, RCTV is on Vimeo at www.vimeo.com/RamCountryTV. Please join us next month as we go on board with Joe Cerisi and Tom DeBello. Have a great one, everyone.